Excellent. Well, first of all, Tony, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you and your members this afternoon. It's a great opportunity to reciprocate an event that we, following on about 18 months ago when we first met at the Wrexham Cyber Summit hosted at Moneypenny's HQ. So this is a great opportunity for us to continue that journey today. I've got quite a broad church of a topic to cover, and I'm going to spend about 40 minutes going through a series of slides that I prepared for today's talk. And I'm appreciative that the audience is a wide range of both practitioners and geographic locations. I'm trying not to do a slide deck that is going to bamboozle people with technology and acronyms, which unfortunately our industry is rife with. And what I'm going to say is if you have any questions throughout, please drop them into the chat. Tony and I will gather them up towards the end of the talk. And obviously, if there's some similar questions, we can group them together and field them. But hopefully, I won't lose anyone on this call. So what I'll do before I really get into the talk, I'll do a little introduction about myself and the business so that you understand a bit of context. So we're based here in beautiful North Wales. It's not a beautiful day today. It's absolutely chucking it down in Wrexham. And for the keen-eyed amongst you, this is on the pig track, climbing up Snowdon, which is the tallest mountain in North Wales, or in Wales, in fact. And that is one of the best views in the UK, if not most of Europe, I would argue. But there is a theme through the slides where you'll see that we use images of North Wales. And that's because we are based here and we deliver to a lot of organizations based in this part of the world. But we leverage a network of practitioners throughout the whole of the UK. We're certified IBM partners and Microsoft Security Technologies. The team has something ridiculous, like over 100 years of experience. I personally have been, I said to Tony earlier, I started out as an engineer and somehow I've managed to do 25 years in IT. But our background is IT, managed services with a security element. So we really understand how IT works in an organization and then the security required to go on top of it. We work in all sorts of sectors, whether it's small, medium-sized businesses, corporate clients, enterprise, public sector, educations. We work in a lot of different verticals. And we are 3 times award-winning Wales Technology Awards and Wales Startup Awards finalists. So why do people consider working with us? Well, we only use Gartner Magic Quadrant technology. So if you don't know what Gartner Magic Quadrant is, Gartner is the world's leading industry analyst, predominantly on technology platforms, and they produce something once a year called the Magic Quadrant, and it's an easy to recognize tool that basically says anything in the top right corner is a leader and a visionary in their field, and anyone else, if you like, in the marketplace gets scattered across it. We only use technology that's recognized as leading and visionary. We have trusted partners in those technologies in place around the UK, so that gives us the ability to deliver national solutions and at scale. And we don't sell products. We don't do demos of technology to sell to clients. What we always do is we start off with the requirement and then we focus, almost like a laser focus with the customer to say, what would a good outcome look like? And that's how we work with our customers. So that's, I got one more slide on the about us. So we do audits, we do awareness training, we help people move through frameworks like Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus, ISO 27001. We have we have individuals such as lead ISO 27001 lead implementation and lead auditors. But we also help customers switch on technologies that they've already purchased, but they probably haven't got. So a lot of customers that we're working with now don't understand that Microsoft have given away a lot of technologies free of charge. You've just got to use them.
Sorry?
Just the intro.
Yeah, it's.
I think is that Helen? Is that Helen? If you wouldn't mind going on mute for me, that would be appreciated. We use ITIL standards, which again, if again, try not to bamboozle you with acronyms, but it's an IT standard practice of continuous improvement and process improvement. So we build, we deliver, we support, we operate, and then we continually improve those environments. And that gives us an overview of the business. And I promised I wouldn't go too long. So today's agenda, this is the bit that we prepared for. So as Tony mentioned, the backdrop is the building itself. This is the Foundry here in Wrexham. This is where our sales operations. We do have a security operations centre just outside Cardiff, and we do have a team based throughout the UK. So what we're going to cover today is the perfect storm in terms of a context. I've prepared a bit of a theatre and a bit of a film connection here, so people can hopefully relate. We're going to touch on the headlines that we see in the press and try to go deeper than just the scare tactics that we all see. Then I'm going to touch on some theory. So there's something called defense in depth, and I'm going to go into some depth to give you a sense of what it is as a cybersecurity methodology, and then the evolution of threats themselves, and bring that up to date for 2021. I just wondered if I don't know who Gaskell's iPhone is. I wonder if they could just go on to mute for me, just because I'm getting a bit of feedback. Thank you ever so much, Gaskell's iPhone. And then we're going to balance complexity and costs. So what that means will be, the more you get into cyber, guess what? It gets more complicated, it gets more expensive. So let's try demystify that. And then the last piece really is I'm going to give you some methodologies that you can take away that you can use to manage your risks effectively. So it's very much hands-on, sort of theoretical, but with applications that you can take away to your business. And what I would say is I'm not keeping an eye on the chat through this talk, but if you do have any questions, please put them into the chat, and then what I'll do is allow 5 or 10 minutes at the end to go through that with Tony and yourselves. So let's just start off with the perfect storm. So if you're not familiar with it, The Perfect Storm was a movie that came out 20 years ago. It stars George Clooney and Mark Wahlberg as the main protagonists, and it's in a nutshell, it's your classic suspense thriller. But what is interesting, and the reason I want to sort of pick on it as a kind of context, is it's a story really of circumstances that magnify every incident that they take a decision and the decision goes wrong. So what tends to happen is throughout the movie, decisions are taken and opportunities are presented, and they pick the worst possible outcome. And then eventually through the film, what tends to happen is a number of competing factions come to the fore. And without wishing to spoil it too much, it is a complete disaster. And I think this analogy with cybersecurity is important, because what we find is there are almost without exception, every customer breach or attack that we work with, we can go back in time and trace where did things go wrong, and invariably it's a people issue, it's a process issue, it's a technology issue. There's usually a sequence of events that have all combined to create the disaster. And this film is, if you've not seen it, I recommend you take the time. I don't want to spoil it completely, but it's certainly one to look at from operational management perspective, as well as mitigating and managing a crisis, or not, as this case may be. Continuing the television theme, I also want to talk about the Twilight Zone economy that we're living through. So what I think, this summarizes, or what we're really experiencing, is the fact that the businesses around not just the UK but around the world are open one minute and close the next, and the impact that has in a cybersecurity context is phenomenal. So we have seen 5 years of digital transformation take place in the UK within 5 or 6 weeks of when this crisis first broke out. And what we found was a lot of these organizations that moved to home-based working or fully mobile working didn't really do it with a security mindset. They did it purely from a, what can I do to stay connected? What can I do to keep in touch with my customers, my colleagues, etc. And even though we're using Zoom today, Zoom itself was the victim of a major privacy breach back in April 2020, when the concept Zoom bombing first took off, where people weren't making the meetings private, and anyone who had access to the meeting could come in. So the applications demonstrated there were gaps, and then the businesses themselves really were left wanting. And what we found as the crisis progressed, where people were being furloughed, they also included furloughing their IT support staff. They also let go IT support providers. So the very people that they needed in the first place to protect their business from cyber attacks and compromises weren't available in that scenario. So a great deal of damage has been done to organizations during this crisis, and most of it has gone unreported, because a small business that suddenly can't connect one day, can't get in touch with its customers, it doesn't make tomorrow's chip papers, it doesn't make the news headlines. It's just another casualty. And we have seen many examples of organizations during this crisis that have stumbled, if you like, through this period technically, and unfortunately are not around anymore to do this. So what I would say is, don't underestimate the importance of a good mobile and a good cybersecurity strategy for your home-based and your distributed workers. And even if you haven't taken it on board fully yet, it's still not too late to do that. And that's part of the content I'm going to cover shortly. So beyond the headlines is something I want to cover next. I think the trouble with the news cycle is everyone's got about 5 minutes attention span. So what you tend to see nearly always with the cyber breaches or the news articles that are reported, it's the same tempo, it's the same type of format, which is, here's a big brand, here's a snippet of a headline which doesn't really tell you anything, even if you're a customer, and it's usually that they've had a customer breach. And then there's always the usual company response, which is, we take data security very seriously, but we do recommend that you change your passwords, etc., etc. And unfortunately, this cycle of news delivery is of no value to most businesses, and most of us are getting quite tired of seeing stories like this. So what I would say, if we take an example, this top left picture here, this is a recent breach in Florida of a water supply and water treatment facility. And the high level news that you'll see is like, hackers attack a water supply. And what I want to try and do is take you down a little bit deeper into what actually happened. So with this one in particular, this is a water treatment business based in Florida. And essentially what happened on the 5th of February, a hacker breached the plant serving Oldmar, which is a city in Florida, and instructed it to increase the amount of alkali in the water to extremely dangerous levels, essentially poisoning the water supply for the entire population. So what we've got here is a very specific attack on a very localized area, but having huge implications to everyone that lives there. And that's the sort of stuff that doesn't really come across in the news headlines. It tends to be, it doesn't really affect me. It's something much higher level. So the problem with this account or this particular organization is the US itself. The US itself has a water supply system of a massively decentralized network of more than 54,000 local systems run by local governments and lots of small companies. So on the one hand, the decentralized concept makes it highly unlikely that one single attacker can take out the entire water supply for the US. But when you have a small business concept and a small team in charge of a localized operation, you get the lack of money and the lack of human capital effects that are in place. So, you've guessed it, a single IT employee managed everything from provisioning software to cybersecurity at this water plant. So how did they do it? Well, it was very simple. All the hacker had to do was gain access to a TeamViewer account, which allowed them to take full control of the plant system. So they don't really know how they got them to do it, but we think there was some sort of social engineering attack was the probable cause. So social hacking humans seems to be massively on the rise as the way that hackers extract the data that they need to get into some core systems. So once they had breached this TeamViewer system, the hackers are able to access the programs that control the chemical levels for the underground reservoir that feeds the water for the 15,000 people serviced by the plant. So with just a few clicks, they increased the alkali levels from 100 to over 11,000 parts per million, effectively poisoning the entire water supply. Now, luckily, this change was monitored and noticed by an operator who quickly reverted the change, and then they disabled all remote system access. So if that had been left unnoticed, it would have gone into the entire water supply within 24 to 36 hours, and it would have essentially been an absolute catastrophe for that part of Florida. So the solution for organizations like this is, they need to wake up to the fact that they can't allow something as important as this to be managed by one individual. It has to be a sort of not just statewide, but it has to be a federal-wide concept to say, look, when you have scenarios that can be breached this easily, you have to have shared responsibilities and shared programs of training, shared programs of awareness and improvements to regulation, and fundamentally that every part of the organization has to demonstrate it takes cybersecurity seriously, because obviously this is a good example of where it failed royally. So that's where I wanted to take you down for a few minutes into the difference between a headline grabbing story like the NPower breach, which simply said the app is no longer available and all users' data has been breached, whereas the water plant example really does give you a horror story of what cyber security badly administered can mean. So moving forward, I did touch on in that last slide this human element, this human social engineering capability that's happening. So what we've got here is an example where a bank in London, who's probably spend tens of millions of pounds per year, if not dollars, of security per year, it was compromised with a £30 device. So the way that this was done was we use techniques in cybersecurity such as brute force or breach attacks and red forcing, where people will pose as technicians. And this individual arrived at a branch, posed as technician to get access to some machines in the back of the front desk, and they simply deployed a Raspberry Pi based device into the back of a branch computer. All this did was essentially track and broadcast the key logging information that was happening on that terminal. So whether it was username, passwords, etc. Eventually, they captured enough information to be able to simulate it themselves. It was broadcast to a team that were based in a van near a nearby hotel. Then they used that information to what appeared to be legitimately access the bank servers. They were also smart enough to realize that figures above 10,000 sterling tends to get reported. So they kept all of the transfers into modest amounts, and they actually transferred £1.3 million through 128 different transfers into mule accounts. So once it was into a mule account, it would quickly disappear and never be recovered and traced. And the only way that these guys were arrested and caught was because they tried the same tactic about a year later at the same, not the same branch, but at the same vicinity. And this story is a couple of years old now, but it shows you that with very, very, very little cost and technology, even the biggest institutions can get breached using a human element. So really, it moves us forward to if this is all happening, what can we do about it, and how can we stop it from happening? So you need to employ more advanced and more sophisticated defense methodologies. So the one that's most commonly used today is something called defense in depth. So defense in depth is a detailed approach where it takes an analogy from also called the castle approach, because it's like the forces and the layers of security on a medieval castle. So you've got the moat to stop marauders coming in. You've got the portcullis to stop people coming through the gates. You've got tall turret walls, etc. So the point is, you make it as difficult as possible for unwanted guests to arrive. And the same approach, if you take it to a domestic property, is exactly the same. You know, when you go out, you lock up, you put your house alarm on, you've got your locks on your doors, etc. But the analogy also has to be viewed that your attack surface, or your surface area, or i.e. the places where you can breach a property or a building, you only need one window to be left open. You only need one door to be left unlocked. So the concept is exactly the same in cybersecurity. You need to realize that you need to be lucky every day and not be breached, whereas a hacker only needs to be lucky once. And they only need to take one opportunity to get into your organization. So you need to look at methodologies like defense in depth to give you that extra reassurance and that extra ability to keep things locked down. So what are the common threats to networked infrastructures? So we've touched a few already about people being hacked, but viruses are still very much common. Malware is added to many emails, and sometimes they are designed to simply offer a denial of service. We do find that sophisticated attacks will simulate the effect of a smash and grab in one department or one area of an organization, when really the data is being exfiltrated or stolen very subtly and surreptitiously somewhere else. So there are sophisticated ways of approaching a network infrastructure to do that. The other thing that you've probably all heard of is phishing or spear phishing, if you're after a particularly high net worth individual or what we call a VIP person in an organization, etc. These individuals will have, I think I've just got a bit of background noise coming there. Don't know who it is. I think everyone's on mute, but we're getting a bit of background here, so let me just take that off. We've got a number of different technologies to stop people coming into your infrastructure. So whether they're using Trojan horse technology, spoofing or sniffing, all of these things essentially give you pause for concern.
Hello, Karl. It's Tony here. Just
Hi, Tony.
Interjecting for a second. Somebody just came late to the meeting, and you've left your microphone on. Would you switch it off, please, because it's interfering with the sound. Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Tony. So, why is defense in depth required? So, we've talked about the fact that complex organizations today have multiple departments, complex networks, some networks on-premise, some networks in the cloud, and one size fits all is too blunt a tool. So you have to have multiple layers, multiple approaches in case any one or many of these tools fail. And that's where the complexity, the challenge comes for organizations to stay safe. So what can you do? From an administrative control perspective, you can look at things that you can do straight away and say, for example, do you have an information security policy? Have you defined in your policies what is acceptable levels of risk and what isn't? Do you look at the vendors that you work with and find out whether if they had a breach, what would you be able to do to mitigate that, to continue operations? We've worked with organizations that are completely wedded to their supply chain ERP system, enterprise resource planning systems. If they went down, what could they do? It would cost them tens of thousands of pounds an hour. Look at the third-party risk management framework. So are you working to a standard such as Cyber Essentials Plus or ISO 27001? Do your third parties that you work with work to the same frameworks? If they do, fantastic. The chances are, if there is a breach in either organization, it will be mitigated and it will be segregated from one another. Do you undertake cybersecurity risk assessments? So have you, when was the last time you looked at all of the systems, the applications in use, what's changed during this crisis? How the users have gone from being an on-premise corporate network predominantly to now being a home-based, home-owned PC network audience. And then finally, what are your information risk management strategies? So again, you need to have different levels of risk management according to the value of the information that you're storing. We've worked with organizations that will say to us, the reason we are the world leader today is because of 25, 30 years worth of engineering know-how and intellectual property that's gone into the products that they make. If that information is breached, if that research is lost to a competitor, it's disastrous, and that is almost existential crisis for them down the track, because the reasons organizations can stay competitive today is because that is a guarded secret. So your secrets have to have different levels of information risk as opposed to your day-to-day operational data. So technically thinking about the same defense in depth is we have lots of different types of technologies, and you'll hear about things like web application firewalls, configuration management, two-factor authentication, and these are just different branches of cybersecurity. But unless they're implemented correctly, you're missing out key tenets, and that goes back to the point of you're letting you're leaving windows or doors open in that medieval castle. So implementing biometrics, so that means that only those users' data that you hold are verified to access that information. The backups that you do for your data is important, because if you have a corrupted production database and you recover from the last backup, you need to know that if you've been breached, the actual backup you're recovering from hasn't been breached as well. So you need to ensure that all of the networks, systems that hang off your environment use these types of technologies for the best possible security. And then lastly, there's a physical layer. We're all very familiar with physical locks, security guards, surveillance cameras, keycard access, etc. But there's an element of taking the technology and applying it in context. So, for example, a keycard access to a door with a timestamp of 2:30 p.m. now, and then somebody is accessing a system remotely from home at the same time. In isolation, each of those events are perfectly fine. If they've both got the credentials and they both got the right access and authorization, they would look okay. But taking the two incidents in context shows you that it's either someone's lost their key card and it's an unwanted attempt, or somebody's breached someone's online credentials and attempting remote hack. So it's understanding the connection between the digital footprint and the physical footprint to give your security team the intelligence that they need to know whether or not it's a legitimate access or it's an illegitimate access. So who needs to use the defense in depth principle? And really there's three categories. There's businesses that wish to prevent those losses from things like malware attacks, phishing attacks, social engineering, etc. But they also want to prove to their customers and to their shareholders and their regulators that they are not misusing customer data, and they are protecting and keeping their information confidential. And if they can't prove that, they might lose their licenses to trade, they might lose their access to market. So it's a case of prevention is better than cure, but also in today's market, it's a necessity to be able to compete and to do business. For all professionals, awareness is the key to avoiding these malicious attacks. So, we're all aware now that there is more and more likely emails sent to each other that could be phishing. But how do you ensure that every single phishing email is mitigated by the end user? So you need to look at training, you need to look at best practices. And there is an element of almost like a cat and mouse game where you are trying to keep one step ahead of the cyber criminals who are doing their best at every turn to exploit an opportunity. So, for example, today's news, the NHS have finally decided to announce that they're going to request telephone or text-based notifications for vaccinations. So the minute that's come out, the chances are we're going to see a huge increase in smishing attacks, which is text-based phishing and engineering attacks on unsuspecting people. And then lastly, for students, it's for the students themselves that are interested in getting into cyber defense as a career. It's understanding that this topic, or the whole defense in depth concept, gives them a very scalable and proven methodology to give them the tools they need to understand how other cybersecurity technologies and methodologies can lay on top. So there are things like the MITRE framework, the NIST framework. There's all these frameworks that exist around the world, but fundamentally it's built on a defense in depth principle. So I'm going to move you through now to some use cases that I think we've mentioned. So again, the use cases down on the left-hand side typically cover most of the things that cybersecurity solutions do their best to mitigate. And on the right-hand side, or the column in the middle, it's the use case or the concerns that those customers have. So we've touched on topics like malware and ransomware. Ransomware is the same as a malware, really, but it's obviously got a monetization element where it's looking to be paid to release your data. What I would say about ransomware, I'm not going to take you down too much on this talk, is our philosophy is don't pay it, because fundamentally, if you're held hostage, your data's locked up, and it's promising to return your data in return for payment, there's two things to consider. The first one is you are dealing with a criminal organization, and they are under no obligation to work to a guarantee that your data is safely returned. So chances are, if you pay it, it won't be. The second thing as well is that once you do pay a ransomware, you go into a term which is lovingly called. That just means other nefarious actors out there will take your details and they will go after you with future attacks. So it's a double-edged sword, really, with ransomware. Our view is, once it's happened, what we try to do is look to the last good piece of data that you had and recover it from that point. And that's why things like managed backup is so important in your cybersecurity strategy. So there's a load of other things in this list that I would say give you use cases. I don't want to go through all of them. I wanted to give you that as an example. But the key thing is that there is a huge list of areas of focus that you should look at and address each use case individually. Don't try to address everything in one fell swoop. We often recommend a customer who has all of these problems is then to plan a very sort of medium to long-term program of works to address them. So the threats themselves have evolved. So I want to just touch on here of what the evolution means. So we've all heard of the sort of anonymous hackers out there, but essentially what's been going on over recent years is that you have a sliding scale of severity, complexity, and resources behind the scenes doing it. And we get to see certain attacks, and we get to know who they are based on their characteristics, their profile. And once we can categorize who we think the attacker is, we then also can use artificial intelligence and security intelligence to find out what the recommended approaches to counter these attacks are. But the reality is, the higher you got the scale, the actors involved are using more and more levels of complexity to the point where it's impossible to compete against and beat and solve all of the problems all of the time. So what we try to say to customers is, understand your level of risk, understand your level of profile, prepare yourself accordingly, make yourself the hardest site to break into, if you like, in your street, but be aware that you cannot stop all security breaches at all times. And what we've got here is a non-linear relationship between the complexity or the investment required and the type of technology. So in the sort of bottom left-hand corner, you can say, well, look, with 80% of threats stopped, if I simply manage my firewall and I have a reasonable team supporting me with a good information security framework, I will stop most of the problems that are likely to come into my business. But the reality is, because of these complexity of threats and these more advanced and more persistent campaigns underway, you need to look at technologies called SIEM. Now, SIEM stands for Security Incident Event Management, and there are lots of different technologies in this space. But what we're doing here is we're going up the chain in complexity, in cost, and intelligence required to interpret them. So you have a different type of analyst fielding these types of issues, and you need a team to be able to respond to the hostile attacks, the breaches, what happens when there's a live attack underway. How do we lock them down? How do we mitigate them? How do we return to business as usual? And then right at the top of the tree, the highest effort is where you have even more advanced technologies underpinned by robust cyber analysis, and that's gathered globally every day using threat researchers and thousands of analysts all over the world. And the most relevant thing you can do at this point is say, well, of all the things that are being published on the planet today, how can I use machine learning and AI technology to aggregate that information to give me what I need right now for this incident or this issue? And that is the highest effort of analysis. And what we find is this will be the banks, this will be the high street, this will be the FTSE 100 in organizations that will have this level of effort. And it takes a long time to go down this time horizon from where you are to where you could be. And again, we operate across this area. We work with organizations that are at different levels in this evolution. And obviously what we try to do is chart a path with them of where they could be and work with them to achieve that. But even right at the top here, we're simply saying you can't have 100% cybersecurity satisfaction. You can only get to the high 9s, and that's simply because even vendors such as Microsoft, who are hoovering up trillions of events per day and then translating that information across the planet, there are still plenty of examples where things are getting through. And what this tends to mean then is when we talk to organizations about cybersecurity tools and footprints that they have, is that what's happened is over a long period of time, they've tended to buy lots of point solutions. And in most corporates today, there is an average of 85 different security tools from 45 different vendors. And straight away, what we do when we find that is it means a few things. First of all, they've spent more and more money over a period of time to get here. Worse than that, as they've put them all in, they've become less and less effective because some tools will be doing the same jobs as other tools. The more tools that they have, the less agile it becomes. And then obviously the complexity of managing it goes through the roof. So the first thing that we try to do with organizations is say, well, where are you on this journey? And if they've fallen foul of this approach, the first thing we would try to do is simplify that estate and consolidate technologies where possible. For example, Microsoft Security gives you technologies that, and it's obviously part of their value proposition, but they will claim up to 16 different types of security technologies can be replaced with one product. And that's the sort of project that you want to look at with any vendor, is how many tools can I take out of this estate to keep the costs down, reduce the complexity, return me to something that feels like it's agile, therefore making it all more effective. So we take a trusted advisory approach to doing this. So if you worked with Security Foundry, what we always do is we sit down and understand the business strategy first of all, and how that aligns to a cybersecurity strategy. We need to understand who's accountable. So some of the examples I gave earlier in the talk, it's no good having one person in an organization that is accountable for cybersecurity. It has to run throughout the entire culture of the organization. Who has access to the sensitive data? Where are the biggest vulnerabilities? So again, taking a risk management approach to what threats, what assets you have, and therefore what vulnerabilities. And if you take a gap analysis, it would give you the opportunity to say, well, in our processes, where do we fall short? In the technology, are the products that we've got that are effective, but they're just not being used properly? Honestly, from a people perspective, what level of awareness can I expect? Because unfortunately, 91% of all breaches from phishing are caused by the users themselves. And what that means is it's the users themselves that have clicked on a link or open an email inadvertently. So we don't like to use a carrot and stick approach all of the time. We simply say, well, look, you've got to reward people for good behavior and doing the right thing. So you definitely want to encourage a culture of, I'm not quite sure if this looks suspicious or not, but can you check it? And not to be frowned upon or thrown back. And equally, you need a general security awareness throughout the entire organization. It isn't the responsibility of IT anymore. It has to be business-wide, from customer services to billing to engineering. Everyone has to have a security awareness. You should use an improvement framework. So whether it's Cyber Essentials Plus, whether it's ISO, it doesn't matter. All of them have their merits. The most important thing is that you do follow a framework, and then that gives you the ability to continually improve it and allow you to monitor it. The last thing I would also say is there's an element of pen testing or penetration testing. This has moved on quite a bit in recent years. It used to be once a year, like an MOT for your car, whereas what we are seeing more and more today is a continuous and automated environment where when things change, you need to make sure that the changes don't open up a security issue. So the way to do that is to have an ongoing monitoring and a management tool in the background, constantly doing it for you, and then bringing to your attention the gaps a change or an upgrade may have caused. So I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to fly through the last few slides before handing over back to Tony. But again, from a methodology point of view, this is the IBM methodology that we use here. That the most important thing you must do is optimize your security operations program. That's your step one. And what we mean by that is that's working with experts like Security Foundry so that you can modernize the security you've got, reduce that complexity we talked about, the number of products, and therefore lower your overall costs. The next thing you should do is focus on the advanced threats. So the way to do that is to use tools that have built-in machine learning and artificial intelligence and insights so that they can make smarter, quicker, better decisions, bring to your attention a problem before it can actually execute. And the third point is to protect those critical assets. So it's basically saying there are certain assets within the organization that you're going to say these need to be only looked at by certain people. So you have to look at things like access management, identity management, privileged access management. And the last thing is to look at the cloud and the mobile. We are moving at light speed into the cloud. The number of applications, the number of systems that we all rely on every day is all predominantly cloud-based today. So it's using this transformation process to take what most organizations have, which is legacy, on-premise, infrastructure-based systems, and then use the cloud as its capability. So a good example of that is when you move to AWS or you move to Azure as your cloud production environment, security tools, look at the security technologies that are built in the cloud that go alongside those vendors. And that gives you the ability to make a stronger posture. I'm just going to fly through these next 2 or 3 slides because I'm conscious I've taken a little bit longer than I expected. This last thing really is just to give you an idea of some of the AI technology that is being used in today's banking applications. Again, this is an IBM use case, but for example, on the right-hand side here, there is technology now that will follow your keystrokes, that will follow your mouse movement. So as you can see my mouse moving around here, it will say, well, this is typical of a normal user. This is abnormal. So if this would happen, we would instigate some perhaps additional security checks, and this is known to be fraudulent. So it's subtle technologies like that is being mapped in real time in the cloud and flagging up to a security analyst team that this is an incident that is unusual. This is out of kilter, even if the username and password is correct. And it's having these sorts of technologies in place that give organizations a fighting chance to compete against some of the more advanced cybersecurity attacks. So let me just recap and conclude before I hand you back to Tony. So we've covered the perfect storm. I've given you some homework to go away and watch the movie. We've taken you beyond the headlines and simply the sensationalist bits of breaches. We've understood what defense in depth means and why it's a good methodology for you to take on board. We've touched on some use cases and the evolution of threats themselves. We've looked at modeling and balancing the complexity of an environment and the costs. And then finally, we've given you some methodologies that you can use to manage your risks effectively. So I think that is the end of the slides there. There are contact details should you wish to get in touch with us. I'm going to ask Tony to come back in and we'll pick up any questions if we've got them. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much, Karl. That was absolutely excellent. Really good presentation, I thought, of some of the key problems with security. There's a number of questions that are appearing on the chat, and I'm just going to flick to those if I can for a second.
Yep, I can see them.
Yeah, about started about 2:41, I think. The
there
questions.
We go. Well, John Ryan, first of all, that was a good observation there on the first slide. You're absolutely right. We leave a window open there. That is a promotional ploy, and it was a hot day, I think, when we took that picture. So first marks to John for that.
Yeah, and after that, I'm not quite sure. Johnny, can you just unmute yourself just for a moment and ask that question?
Yes.
Well, basically, when they're saying that we've got very idle over the years, and we're now using wizards to update software and things, whereas years ago, maybe you updated your BIOS by changing a chip in your computer, or you had a disk or a tape or something to update the software with. But then physical intervention and possibly a technician coming along to help you. And it's cheaper to do it the idle way. But of course, we've now left machines willing and open to have software coming in and taking rubbish in from anywhere. And this is a really big weakness. And the other current belief is one really good way of security is to unplug the thing, break the physical connection so you can't get critical systems like a water plant control system modified without some sort of physical presence to give the security.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you must not overlook the value of the individual. We try to balance it ourselves because, for example, we don't have a policy. We have a 10+ day policy with updates, for example. So an update might come out from Microsoft. We don't immediately apply it, and the reason being is that quite often in the days afterwards, if there's anything wrong with those updates, it gets manifested, it gets reported, it gets picked up. So what you tend to find is that there is a balance between applying it immediately and not applying it at all. And that sweet spot is usually about 7 to 10 days after it's come out. But the reality is anything that any concept that is update this, update this, update this, is basically saying to you it's inherently insecure in the first place, because what we find is the world of, let's call it's signature based, right? So so whatever's on your antivirus, it's fantastic. It'll be a great piece of software, provided you updated it. If you didn't update it and something new comes along today, it's going to walk straight past it and land in your inbox, and it won't quarantine it, it won't flag it, because it won't have known it. And that's the reality with the old technologies, is that they're only as good as the last update. The cloud gives us the technology now to say, well, take away this hassle for me, but give me the guarantee that what you're doing is up to date and is bang up to date. And that has taken a lot of businesses a long time to, if you like, permit and trust. And we seeing it ourselves in the last couple of years in security. We wouldn't have looked at Microsoft credibly 2 or 3 years ago. We're seeing it today is that they're actually the best equipped global vendor. And that's just because of scale. I mean, they've got 3,500 analysts working in cybersecurity all over the world 24/7. You know, that's unmatched in any other security company.
Well, that segues very nicely, Karl, into the next question from Aradna, who asks, could you say a little bit about the recent Microsoft Exchange email breach, I think?
Yeah, do you know what? I'm going to pass on that, because it's okay. It's quite a deeply technical issue that came up the last week. But the fundamental principle is it's having, if you have a good security methodology in place, you can identify that weakness, you could reverse out of it, and you could reapply it. And I think the trouble is a lot of these models, or a lot of these things that happen, it's because people don't have a framework in place in the first place to say, well, before I apply this change, can I reverse out of it? And if you can't reverse out of it, that's the trouble.
Yeah, thanks. Helen's come up with a question. What machine learning and artificial intelligence models are used to analyze published data? What's the data source? I'm not sure if you're going to be able to have a stab at that, Karl, really.
All I can say is that AI 3 or 4 years ago was all marketing, to be honest. We didn't really believe it. Machine learning to a certain extent is true. I mean, what we're seeing now is, if we look at a customer environment, I mean, even quite modest size organizations can have 100 to 200,000 events per second happening on their network. So, no one person could even begin to look at a dashboard and understand it. So you do need to trust the tools to say, tune it all out for me and tell me the 6 or 7 events that are happening in the last hour that I need to look at. That's the difference. And I think that whether it's IBM flavored, whether it's Microsoft flavored, it doesn't matter, as long as you're using a global vendor like that with a good pedigree in AI technology. I think you're onto a winner.
Yeah. The next one is, I think Mr. Corwett is online, so perhaps he can ask his own question here. He wants to know if there's a group who are exploring the OR within cybersecurity. Are you online? Yeah.
I am, yeah. Hi, it's Ranulph. Basically, it's more, I'm just thinking from a sort of OR stance and kind of wondering, there must be, I'm assuming, some overlap between sort of OR and cybersecurity, and the sort of the AI machine learning sort of question touched on that. So I'm guessing sort of crypto would also be a touch point, but just more kind of wondering kind of on the sort of simulation sort of side, is there anything that we can do or anything that could be done, anything that's being explored? And it's just more, it's fairly open-ended questions to see what people know, really, just because I'm relatively new to the area, been OR for a while, but yeah.
Are you thinking of, in the OR society, do they have a specialist group of people? Is that what you're asking?
Or academics, or or just generally wide, because it's cyber in itself is a relatively up and coming area, and it's just yeah.
Well, there are people that write about it in the journals, so I've seen a couple of articles. I'm not sure that there is a group that deals with it specifically inside the OR society, but what we can do is we can look into that and come back to you with some answers and perhaps some people to contact in different places. So if that's okay, perhaps we can email you after the event sometime.
Sounds awesome. Thank you. That sounds good.
Okay, good. John's asked another question. Even if one suspects that email is dodgy, many mailers now require the email to be opened before it can be forwarded to the phishing function.
All right. Okay, that's interesting.
I
wouldn't recommend that.
and me neither. I mean, I'm very nervous about opening anything with a dodgy link on it.
Yeah, there's what I would say with phishing in particular is it is a dark art. We use various grades, various layers, so that we can say to a company, look, I'll give you an example. We work with an organization that might say 60 or 70,000 emails a month. And then when we have a monthly review, we'll say 5 or 6 were a bit suspicious. What do we do with them? Well, first of all, we quarantined all of them.
Yeah.
And then before we even allow the user to look at it, we're looking at it. We're looking at it with IT support. We're thinking, is this more than just an opportunistic, or is this a targeted attack? And what I think you'll find is no one tool is perfect, because the trouble is you set the tolerances so high and so fussy, guess what? You and I would never receive an email in the first place. Yeah. So you have to have an element of tuning, and perhaps this goes back to the earlier question about where the OR methodologies could be applied. Is, you know, there is a great deal of experience in tuning and baselining an environment and saying, well, what would good feel like? You know, that is something that is definitely something I would say we'd look at.
Yeah. Just coming back on that, Carl, and on the emails, I mean, sometimes you get strange emails, and I'm sure we've all had them. But I think some of the most devious are when they try to imitate your email address, and they don't really have access to your email, but they've put some kind of code behind it so that when you click on the link to find out where the email is or something, that's where the malware is going to be.
What I would say to everyone on the call is, if you're using Office 365 in the cloud, there's a huge amount of protection built in.
Yeah.
And depending on whether you're a corporate user or a big enterprise user, there'll be technology switched on that you can't see, so that the security teams are using it for you. But then again, don't ever be complacent. You know, it's nearly always the case that it goes back to the principle. Someone's mentioned here honey traps. You know, you're absolutely right. We often think, well, you know, the weakest line of defense are the users themselves. It's not their fault. It's because people design systems in such a way to. I mean, if I got an email from the CEO of the business to say, you know, you've worked really hard since this crisis began. we'd like to thank you with a £250 John Lewis voucher. You're going to click on the link, quite likely, okay? It's human nature. The honey trap concept there from Barry, there are other things that we do with technology that basically say, well, we think this attacker is going to do this. Let's let them in. Let's let them see where they're going to go. And the other thing we will always do is we will create false ports and false doors, so that if anyone should come through these doors or these ports, we know they're an attacker. So whether you call that a honey trap or not, you know that when they've come in through that, rather than just close it down and say none shall pass, you might at that point go, well, actually, where are they going, and who, and try to get almost offensive with it. That's where you'd love the game, if you like, to go. But it comes back to effort, and it comes back to time and resource and all the things that we've got. And what most businesses will say to us is, look, I don't want to have a breach. I don't want to have my guys working flat out all the time doing this stuff. So balance it. And that's where it's a risk and reward conversation, isn't it? Hope that answered your question, Barry.
Yeah, okay. Right, thanks, Karl. We're going to have to leave it there, but that's been a fantastic roundup of all the
my pleasure. Thank you, Tony.
Issues and everything. So that's great. And I'm just going to, we can't clap our hands, I don't suppose, but I'll put a little clap on screen, and perhaps other people can do that if they want to do it as well, just to show appreciation. So no noise. It's like a soccer match without the crowd, I'm afraid.
Thanks, Tony.
Okay, thanks, Karl. Maryam's been waiting very patiently, and I'm going to switch over to Maryam. So Maryam, if you'd like to share your screen, and then we can hear your story. We're really looking forward to hearing how the OR Society Scholarship perhaps helped.
Yes, hello everyone, and thank you for allowing me to present my story today. And I promise I won't take up too much of your time. I am going to start by telling you about who I am and how I come to present to you today, where my OR journey is going to take me next. So, who am I? Well, my name is Maryam Mojdehi, and I was born in Iran. I am a former senior nurse who moved to the UK 10 years ago, bringing with me my daughter and my lifelong passion for mathematics, data, and statistics. I graduated in BSc Mathematics in summer 2019, and I am currently undertaking an MSc in Operational Research and Risk Analysis. I'm also the recipient of this year's National Bursary from the OR Society. Sorry. So my first career was as a senior intensive care nurse in Iran. In this context, I have 8 years experience of analyzing data to make decisions about patient care and to evaluate the effectiveness of my treatment plans. And I often overlooked areas of the nursing role is the need to work daily with precise data in a professional, pressured context. For example, when I carried out follow-on work to analyze the effectiveness of vaccination programs, my team carried out and I coordinated. After my international relocation to the UK 10 years ago with my daughter led to a career change, I took the opportunity to pursue my lifelong passion for mathematics, statistics, and data analysis by studying BSc Mathematics in Manchester. I studied for the required IELTS language and the GCSE mathematics qualification I needed first, whilst also working full-time in hospitality and social care. This then allowed me to access a foundation course before commencing my degree, during which I continued to work part-time for the university. After 4 years of hard work, occasional tears, and a lot of late nights, I graduated with first class honors in summer 2019. Since graduating, I have undertook a variety of office-based data roles to gain experience and save my master's. These included time with Information Commissioner's Office and General Medical Council, developing homeworking skills throughout the social isolation. I began my operational research and risk analysis in MSc in October 2020 with the kind support of the OR Society, as I'm very gratefully received £10,000 national bursary to support my studies and further learning in the field of OR. Now, my undergraduate mathematics unit included, during my maths degree, I studied these units, including statistics and decision mathematics. And I've always had an interest and aptitude for probability and statistics and how the analysis of data can inform better decision making. I use many of these principles when working in medicine, using all variable information to inform and analyze my patients' care. Studying the last 2 units on this list fired my interest on the field of operational research. Decision mathematics in particular provided me with a strong introduction to OR, covering methodology, modeling, optimization, and decision trees. I particularly enjoyed these aspects of my course, leading me to pursue OR further and undertake my current business analytics MSc in OR and risk analysis. My current postgraduate program of a study in operational research and risk analysis include these units listed here. To give you an indication of the wide variety of OR-related theories and practices my course involves, I will briefly talk you through some of these highlights. In simulation and risk analysis, I consider discrete event simulation, general queuing theory, and how to reduce variance to improve system performance. In risk performance and decision analysis, I studied decision trees, multi-criteria decision analysis, and optimization techniques for effectively analyzing problems. In mathematical programming and optimization, I developed skills in linear, nonlinear, and dynamic programming, as well as software to support decision making. I applied statistics and business forecasting. I built up my understanding of multiple linear regression analysis, as well as lasso and ridge regression. And in supply chain logistic management, I developed my knowledge of global supply chains and many aspects of logistic network design. I am particularly enjoying this unit and the concepts that it teaches, and I hope to look for possible employment in this field. So as you can see, I have a lot to learn, remember, and apply on my course before I graduate. But when I do, I intend to continue my OR journey by pursuing a career in one of the many fields covered by operational research, including public sector, perhaps working within the local government agencies, carrying out statistical analysis and modeling, which supports decision makers, or maybe use my medical background and understanding of patient care to support a data role within the public sector, currently of great national relevance or maybe international relevance. With the continuing rollout of COVID vaccines and local authorities planning for the future. Or finally, logistics and supply chain management is an area new to me before beginning my MSc, but which I have found particularly interesting and which is like a growing importance in 21st century world, with considerations for environmental and geopolitical concerns, and the hugely changed world of post-COVID local supply logistics. So now you know where I want to end up. I would just like to take a moment to explain how the OR Society Bursary is helping me to get there. Not only through the excellent networking opportunities offered by events such as this, but also through the bursary. As a single parent of a teenage daughter who began her own exciting journey this year in studying medicine degree, I worked throughout my undergraduate studies to support us both, studying mathematics full-time whilst also being a full-time mom. Although nobody could have predicted the year we've all been through, having the OR bursary to support my learning through this year in particular has been a lifesaver. With part-time work much harder to come and the added pressure of social isolation, with my daughter having left for university in Wales in September, without the OR Society bursary, none of this would have been possible. But with it, my journey into a career in operational research has only just begun. Now, thank you for listening to my story today, and I'm very grateful to the OR Society for giving me the opportunity to do so. I would be very happy to take any questions you may have, and please do feel free to contact me at the email address on this screen if you would like to discuss further my OR journey and the kind support from the OR Society. Thanks, everyone. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Maryam. There is a question that's popped up in the chat from John Ryan, and he's asking the question: how did you learn about the OR bursary?
When I was doing decision mathematics module in Manchester Metropolitan University as my undergrad degree, one of our lecturers just put it on a board that there is an OR society, and guys, you can join. It might be like opportunity for finding a job through networking with this society in future. As always, I was always like an opportunity seeker, looking for opportunities to improve my career and my life. So I wrote it down and registered myself. After I graduated in that summer, I've got an email that there is a bursary and you can apply. And then I was so happy I applied.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
And you got it, so that's even better.
And I've got it, yeah. I'm really grateful. I found this, I really found that they listened to my story and where I come from and how much effort I put through and how difficult, you know, my life has been.
That's fantastic.
And how hard I'm working. So I found this society very diverse society as well, can say.
And when are you likely to complete your course now?
So in September 2021. Yeah.
So then you're ready for work, is the answer. So
I'm hoping, yes, I'm doing a
yeah.
master now in University of Manchester.
Yeah, good. That's fantastic. And you mentioned about, you think the OR Society is a diverse society. By that, do you mean it's equal opportunity?
Equal
approach?
opportunity to everyone, you know,
Yeah,
regardless of everything.
fantastic. Well, that's good. That's
Uh,
very good to hear.
I
Pramila's
just
on
had
the
one.
phone.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah,
Thank you.
hi.
Just had one question. Maryam, do you what is the reason for doing further studies? Do you think you need to do further studies to get a job in OR? Wasn't your maths degree sufficient for you to get, say, an apprenticeship kind of a job or something in OR?
Obviously, if you think about maybe age and also English being my second language, I tried my best, which I found jobs in Information Commissioner Office and then in General Medical Council, but those jobs were not exactly relevant to what I wanted to do. I wanted always to work in supply chain management or statistics. So I then decided to do my master because without this master, it would be very difficult. Because I think the employees, most of them take into consideration, you know, where you are from in terms of language. They look at your CV, they don't give you the chance or opportunity to present yourself these days, unfortunately. So I thought by doing this master course, it gives me that gap, because all my work experience is in nursing, and I don't have relevant work experience in statistic and operational research. But doing this master course, hopefully I can fill that gap. And obviously further complete my studies, because I'm learning a lot of new stuff in this master course.
Okay. Thank you, Maryam.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, very good. Are there any more questions for Maryam, or shall we leave it there? I'm very grateful to Maryam for her presentation. It's very interesting to hear how you came to do the application for the scholarship, and I wish you the best of luck in your new career.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to show my appreciation with another hand clap. It's going to go up there. And if you can just stop sharing your screen right now. Obviously, if anybody wants to contact Maryam, then her email address is at the bottom of that screen. Do you want to just flash it up again, your email address, in case? Yeah, that's it. So if anybody does want to contact her, that's how you can get hold of Maryam. So thanks very much, Maryam, for taking the time to come and tell us about that today. I've just got one final thing to do before I close the meeting, and that's just basically share my screen for a second if I can. I think it's that one. I hope I've shared the right screen. Let's try and see. Yeah. So what we have here is future meetings, and if I can just, don't know if I can do that actually. Yeah, I may be able to. I'll just start from the current slide. Yeah, so we have two meetings planned, and these meetings are planned in September and October. Strangely enough, they're both provisionally on the same date, the 29th of September and the 29th of October. The first meeting on the 29th of September is about net zero carbon, and it's about linear programming. And that's from BEIS, the business, I can't remember the full name of that organization. You online, Barry, just to tell us the BEIS Business Enterprise, is it? And no, Barry's gone, I think. So it's the net zero carbon, and that ties in with COP26, which is in November. So that's an arrangement, I think, with Alec Wilby from BEIS. And then on the 29th of October, we have a visit planned to GCHQ, all being well, and we can get outside and do face-to-face again. We're hoping to go to GCHQ Manchester. It's a meeting we've had planned for some time, and we'll have a tour of the facilities and some talks. So that's on the 29th of October. So I just wanted to flag those up to people, just to get them in your diary, and hopefully we'll update you if things change or dates move around, but those are two meetings we have planned. And just before lockdown last year, we did have a meeting planned at Novellus, which was the aluminium plant in Warrington. That's still on the cards, but that will be sometime in 2022, we think. We still will have perhaps other online meetings prior to these dates, so keep watching and stay posted, and we'll keep in touch, as it were. And that's it. I just wanted to mention to anybody who's not a member online of the OR Society that you can join the OR Society. If you're a student, it's free for a year, and then there's a graduated fee structure that kicks in. So if you know any students that would like to join the OR Society, they can join free for a year and receive the benefits and join our meetings and so on. And if you're interested, or you have people who are interested in joining the society, then certainly let them know about the opportunities and get them to go to the OR Society website and look at the membership pages. And that's it, really. That's the web page. That's me if you need to get in touch with me at all about anything. Thanks for coming along and listening today. Big thanks to our two speakers. Thanks very much to Karl Hargrave, who gave us a really good presentation, I think, about how to stay safe online. And thank you very much for Maryam for giving up her time and coming along and telling us about her story today. So thanks very much, everybody, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you very much,
Thanks,
everyone.
Tony.
Thanks, Carl.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Maryam. Bye.
Bye.